Ms. Fidel and Karen Herrick. Evening, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome, welcome. Here's Sudarshana now. We'll give it just another minute or two in case anybody else is joining. Yeah. All right, well, it is 6:03, so I do think we can go ahead and get started for anybody watching at home now. Nicole, if I can ask you to share the presentation and I'll give some opening remarks.
Sure.
Great, thank you. So good evening all, and thank you for joining us tonight as we continue on with the town's housing production plan process and engagement. The process is one focused on community engagement to better understand the local and regional need for housing development and how Reading can best prepare for such. I'm Andrew McNichol, the senior planner for the town, and with me is our working team, including Assistant Town Manager Jean Delios, Director of Equity and Social Justice Sudarshana Chatterjee, Select Board Member Karen Herrick, CPGC Member Katrina Meyer. I see our Town Manager Fidel Maltez on the call, as well as soon to be Assistant Town Manager Matt Cronalis. And that's our working group for tonight. So we can go ahead to the next slide or the agenda, please, Nicole.
Sure.
Tonight we'll be reviewing the HPP process and work that we've done to date. We'll discuss the previously expressed goals and strategies of housing development that we've heard so far in, and we'll also seek your feedback on the existing and any new goals or strategies for going forward with the plan. We'll also provide an update on the next steps for the HPP process towards the end, which will be a few more public meetings and presentations. So for those that are unfamiliar with Zoom, we do ask that you please remain muted until Q&A is opened. Please utilize the raise hand feature that's found under reactions, or simply raise your hand yourself and we'll look to call on you for any comments and questions during the Q&A. And you are welcome to provide questions in the chat as well, as they'll be sent directly to the host, which is myself and Nicole. So please know that RCTV is also broadcasting and recording the meeting, which will post the recording and tonight's slides on the project webpage. And I think that's all from me for now. So I'm going to pass it to our consultant from Answer Advisory, Nicole Lambert. Thank you all.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Nicole Lambert with the Answer Advisory, and I've been kind of leading the charge here with Andrew getting this housing production plan shaped up and ready for everybody to see and make comments on. We'll get started here to kind of see where we are in the process. So in the last meeting, we discussed the comprehensive housing needs assessment, some demographic information and other development constraints, limitations, and capacity for growth. Tonight, we're going to talk about goals and strategies. So again, kind of discussing numerical goals for annual housing production, assessing the types of housing that's needed in the town of Reading, identifying sites for future development, and zoning changes and or policy changes that would allow for the development of additional affordable housing units. So we'll kind of get started with the needs assessment findings and from the survey. So in the last meeting, we discussed the survey responses to date, which was as of October. So today we have our final results when the survey was closed November 18th. And we had 793 responses, most of them coming in electronically, although we did get a good number of paper responses as well. I would say probably about 50 of those came in handwritten. And we wanted to kind of kick off to show that the survey was widely distributed and also widely answered among the precincts in town. So pretty much from precinct 1 through precinct 8, you have about the same amount of participation, at least 10%, some areas a little bit more. And then there is the NA category of people who either did not put their precinct in or were not residents of the town of Reading. So we have a pretty good balance of input here from people who live throughout the town in different areas. Another kind of summary of the data that we found. Some of this is, pretty much to be expected. So 92, a little over 92% of the residents identify as Caucasian, 52.4% identify as female. And again, this is of the respondent households. 54.45% are earning over $150,000 a year of household income. 95.8% non-veterans. 89.17% of the respondents own their homes, so they are homeowners, and 80.34% of those live in single family homes. So the majority of respondents are homeowners and live in a single family home, and 59.61% of those homeowners do have a mortgage currently on their property. And 65.78% plan to stay in their current home as they age. And the most common household sizes were two persons at 35.27% and 4-person households at 23.26%. Moving on to the next slide, just some more kind of overview summary of the survey data. So we talked about 78% of the respondent households that are 2-person families are usually just 2 adults with their partner or spouse. So it's a partner-spouse situation in 78% of those 2-person households. 84% of respondents said that they're not likely to move out of Reading in the next 5 years. 29.65% said that they would consider moving, or the reason that they would consider moving is the cost of living. 18.22% stated that the reason that they would move out of Reading would be to downsize their current living situation. 25% of respondent households are not confident that they can afford their home as they age. So if you think about it, we had a majority of households would like to stay in their home as they age. However, 25% of those are not confident that they will be able to because of the cost of upkeep and living expenses in that property. 48% of respondent households agree that there is not enough affordable housing options in Reading. And 43% of the respondent households support a commercial linkage fee to fund affordable housing. 30% are unsure. Going to kind of go on a limb here and say the reason why some people may be unsure is that they're not fully aware of what a commercial linkage fee is. So some of that 30% could sway either way, towards a yes or a no, with some more education in the community as to what that commercial linkage fee is. In general, respondents supported increased density in the following areas: within half a mile of the train station or a train station, in industrially zoned areas, commercial areas, and also in downtown. So those are the places where residents who responded to the survey support increased density of housing. And then in general, most respondents were supportive of the following property uses to earn income in their property. And that was home businesses and accessory dwelling units / and or in-law apartments. So those were the top picks for people who said that if they were to use a portion of their home to generate income, these were the two top uses for that question. And then kind of talking about developing affordable housing. So in general, respondents to the survey support the following methods to develop affordable housing. And that is rehabilitation of vacant and or foreclosed properties, development of town-owned parcels of land, and development of mixed-use buildings. So those are kind of the top 3 methods that were supported by respondents here in the survey. And then in general, respondents support the following types of development of housing: single family housing coming in at number 1, 2-family housing coming in at number 2, and then we had a pretty strong vote for 55 plus communities, assisted living and or senior housing, and the accessory dwelling units and or in-law apartments. So those are the highest backed categories, I would say, as far as the types of development that respondents to the survey are in favor of. And then we took a look at the housing cost burden of survey respondents, and we're going to get into this in a little bit more detail. So as you see, the higher the income, the lower the housing cost burden. Now, I want you to keep in mind as well that the majority of people who live in Reading are homeowners. So when you have a mortgage or when you apply for a mortgage, the banks do have criteria and limits as to how much of your income can be spent on your mortgage payment. So if we take that into consideration, we can expect that with such a high home ownership rate, that majority of people who live in the town of Reading do not have a severe cost burden. However, once you move to the lower income categories, you'll start to see that cost burden goes up quite a bit. And specifically in that 0 to, I would say, $49,000 range is where people are struggling the most. And I would like to say here, we can also kind of come into play with the lower incomes. We know that people cannot afford to pay 5 times of their monthly income for rent or for their mortgage. So in some of these situations in the lower income brackets, there may be a possibility that the resident has funds saved up that they're using to pay for their housing expenses that is not dependent upon their actual income. So they may have some money put away to be able to pay and stay in their house. Some people may be receiving assistance from relatives, or they may also have a roommate in some of these situations. So it's not the clearest picture of the housing cost burden, but as you can see, as the income levels go down, the housing cost burden goes up. And some people in these lower income categories may not have the help of, a family member or someone else kind of assisting with their housing payment. So we do need to kind of think about those people at the lower income levels. Getting into asking people if they know if they know of anyone or they themselves could benefit from the following types of housing, and affordable housing and supportive housing that is for seniors. The orange bar were the two highest rated types of housing by people who answered the survey. So you have affordable housing coming in first, supportive housing for seniors, low moderate income housing for seniors as well. And then you have low moderate income housing for families. So those are the top categories, top rated categories, as far as the types of housing that are needed, or the types of affordable units that are needed in the community. And then this is just another question that we added in there to get people thinking about their affordable housing experiences or experiences for others. And for the most part, if you see agree and disagree are kind of neck and neck, as far as people thinking that they can find housing that's affordable to them in Reading. But if you look at the people who are unsure, I'm going to possibly say that those are people who maybe have not had to look for housing in a long time, so they're not sure what the market is out there. Or they're staying where they're at and they don't intend on moving, so they have not been out there looking for housing, so they're kind of fall into that unsure category. Now that could change in the event that someone does turn around and start to look for a different housing option. They may say, yes there is, or no there's not. But as you can see, agree and disagree are pretty much neck and neck here. So a lot of people do agree that there is a challenge to finding affordable housing for themselves when they do go out there and look for a place to move to. And then just talking about the populations who need the most housing support in Reading, as you see, this is kind of it runs from beginning to end here, and you have a lot of different populations where people kind of place more weight on who needs assistance. And the overwhelming number one choice here is first-time home buyers. So everyone is kind of really pushing for this, for first-time home buyers getting some assistance. Seniors, qualifying low-income households, and families are kind of at the top. And then if you look, people with special needs is probably the other top category there of people who need housing support. And then support services that people would be interested in, or programs that people would be interested in that maybe the town providing is, of course, this has been top of the list in comments and everything else, is property tax relief. The other kind of top selection here is home energy efficiency. And then number 3 coming in at fuel and or utility assistance. So those are kind of the top 3, and then moving down from there, first-time home buyer programs is kind of, the 4th runner-up there. So as we can see from these 2 questions and the responses, that people kind of really going for first-time homebuyer programs, You know, they know that seniors need some support here, people with special needs, and are very aware that some of these older homes have energy upgrades that need to be done. Obviously, utilities are going to be even more expensive this winter than they were in the past, and people are definitely going to need some more help when it comes to paying for gas, electric, and oil this coming winter. So they kind of fall in line with what we're seeing pretty much everywhere as well. Questions? Andrew, are you getting any questions?
I have not seen any pop up.
This might be a record. Okay, well, we'll just jump into the next section then. If somebody has questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. And Andrew, you'll let me know. I can't see anything, just so everybody knows, so I feel like I'm talking to myself. So we'll get into talking about goals and strategies. So we looked at the responses from the survey. We looked at the previous housing production plan and things that have happened, you know, since that plan was created in 2018. So the goals here, and this is a summary, and we'll get into them in a little bit more detail in the following slides. We want to support Reading's lower income and vulnerable populations. We want to continue to create SHI eligible units as well as a diverse housing stock. Preserve the existing affordable housing supply as well as naturally occurring affordable housing. So and what that means is landlords who rent property but are not charging like market rent, their rents are below market and they kind of tend to keep them there. So that's what we would consider naturally occurring affordable housing. And then, you know, managing growth and future development, because as we know, we do want to make sure that we're providing enough housing, but also don't want to kind of overdo it. Strengthening the education around affordable housing and local relationships with community groups, lenders, and other people who would be willing or are interested in kind of strengthening the affordable housing outreach and construction. Developing and or expanding supportive services and programming for residents. Exploring options for intergenerational living. This is again becoming very common. Not always common in the United States, but common outside of the country where people do live like this, you know, normal. This is normal for multiple generations to be living under one roof together. Identifying opportunities for the right size of developments, which kind of ties back to that managing growth, and ensuring that there is equity and availability of housing and housing resources to everyone in the community. So there are 3 areas of focus kind of with these goals here. And the first area of focus is regulatory and development focus, which is going to look at zoning regulations, development tools, geography, location, etc. And then the next area of focus is going to be a focus or centered around funding and resources for affordable housing. So we'll talk a little bit about revenue sources for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and in general for the construction of affordable housing, support, incentives, and opportunities. And then the last area of focus is on leaderships, partnerships, and education, where we'll talk a little bit about collaboration, training, inclusivity, and some programming. Okay, So this section, we're going to talk about regulatory and development goals and strategies, which will bring us here. So goal number 1 is to increase, diversify, and promote a mix of housing options for low to middle income households. So again, I know we talked about this in the prior meeting, and that is targeting residents who are earning between, I would say, 30 to 80% of median income. Goal 2 is to create and maintain housing that is available and accessible to aging and disabled populations. So again, accessible housing units for not only mobility, but also for sensory issues as well. And then goal 3 is proactively planning for and managing the integration of housing growth and mitigating impacts to enhance the existing residential character of the town. So we want to make sure that developments that are being built match the fabric of the community, and that things that are being constructed make sense where they're being put. I guess that would be the word I would use there today. Goal 4 is the equitable access to housing opportunity, public spaces, green spaces, and healthy and safe environments. And then goal 5 is to make sure that we maintain Reading's safe harbor designation. So we need to continue at a pace of, we need to continue affordable housing development in order to remain above the 10% of qualified units on the state subsidized housing inventory. So that is a goal here, that we want to continue to create affordable housing for people who live in Reading. And so with those goals being said, here are some of the strategies to achieve those goals that we've outlined. So number 1 would be adopting or amending zoning that would comply with the MBTA communities legislation. I know that the town is currently working on this and will be submitting some documentation to DHCD for review and hopefully approval as an MBTA community. Number 2 would be identifying zoning districts and geographies in which current regulations can be modified so that we could develop some affordable housing units there that would go on the state housing inventory list. Number 3 would be to strengthen and expand inclusionary zoning to allow for development of affordable housing opportunities. Looking at the zoning bylaws to define and permit congregate housing, and identifying sites with the potential to convert buildings to congregate housing use. Number 5 is to allow for redevelopment or conversion of pre-existing non-conforming residential uses by right, and making the permitting pass a little bit easier for people to go through. And then strategy number 6 is to consider zoning amendments in order to allow for accessory dwelling units to be constructed by right, or to lessen the restrictions on the permitting process for people who would like to construct an accessory dwelling unit in or on their property. Strategy 7 is to continue to provide technical support for 40R, 40B, and other local permit applications to ensure that the construction process is going smoothly for these affordable units. Number 8 would be obviously preserving the existing affordable housing stock and make sure that they continue to qualify for the subsidized housing inventory. And number 9 is to maintain that safe harbor designation by maintaining, tracking, and continuing affordable housing, continuing the construction of affordable housing developments to achieve and maintain that 10% target of number of affordable housing units. And the last few here are kind of more green space or energy efficient geared, and talking about preserving and protecting the existing parks and open space in the town so that everybody can use them, and requiring installation or improvement of sidewalks, bike paths, trails, and or transit-oriented development for multifamily and mixed-use developments. Again, this is popular everywhere. Less and less people want to drive, so they're putting bike paths pretty much everywhere. Most streets in a lot of communities have a bike lane. And we're seeing a lot of creative things coming out of the woodworks for bike paths and trails and transit-oriented development, which is very interesting, I have to say. And looking at net zero and energy efficiency requirements, especially meeting those in new construction buildings that come into the town, which pass on savings to the end user. And then the next strategy or focus that we'll discuss here is the funding and resources for affordable housing. So the goals here that we have for funding and resources is, number one, supporting the low and middle income populations with programs and services. So creating some of those programs and services so that the people who are in the middle to lower income category have somewhere to go to receive assistance, to ask questions, to maybe get referrals, those kind of things that we're looking for here. And number two is to look at the maintenance and upkeep of the existing affordable housing stock, to make sure that they are, in compliance with regulations as far as health and safety and building code and those kind of things. And the town intends to continue to look for opportunities to increase the affordable housing units within the existing properties or on existing properties. 3 would be to maintain and seek national, state, and or local designation that provides grants and other financial opportunities to develop and or maintain affordable housing. And 4 would be to ensure equitable access to financial support and services, with some examples there like energy improvements, building retrofits, fuel assistance. So some of the things that we talked about here, like bringing buildings up to code. And then to kind of piggyback on that, the funding or resource strategies that we've identified here would be to develop and or enhance the first-time home buyer program with the Reading Housing Authority and other local institutions or community groups. Strategizing uses of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund money, and look at ways to increase the revenue resources that are dedicated to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And we do have some ideas on that. Seeking funding to create a local aging in place program. So again, many respondents stated that they are intending to stay in their house as they age. So what types of things could we create to make it easier for people to age in place in their home, whether that's, retrofitting for mobility, accessibility, or other types of accessible features that may make it easier for an aging population to stay in their home. And also looking at opportunities to provide and or increase veterans supportive housing vouchers. So that is also an opportunity here, is to try to increase the number of VASH vouchers that are out there in the town of Reading, and hopefully be able to assist some additional people among the veteran population. And then just to kind of discuss a little bit about the revenue for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We've talked about this in our focus groups and, kind of behind the scenes as to, what are other communities doing and how do we get some more funding in there for the development of affordable housing. So some of the options that we looked at here were inclusionary zoning payments, which include the 40R incentive payments, payments in lieu of providing affordable housing units, voluntary developer payments to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, or proceeds from the sales of surplus municipal or tax foreclosed properties. So that could be a way to fund affordable housing development, is when the town sells some property or surplus property, that the proceeds from those sales go to the Affordable Housing Trust Funds. Private donations from, local businesses or local, healthcare providers or whoever you would normally go to raise some capital funds there. You could request private donations. There is some revenue that is gained by the town from the lease of municipal land for cell phone towers. So a portion of those funds could also possibly be contributed to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And a few other things that we discussed recently were proceeds from the resale of affordable units. So when an owner of an affordable unit turns around and sells their property, any proceeds that are due to the town would then go into this Affordable Housing Trust Fund and be recycled. Real estate transfer fees. And again, this is just a portion of those transfer taxes that are paid at closing that would be applied or be allocated to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Again, this is popular in many communities throughout the state of Massachusetts, and that is how they do fund a good portion of their Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Another one that is pretty popular is the short-term rental fees. So a lot of communities where people are renting out their properties as like an Airbnb or some sort of short-term, week to week or day-to-day rentals, they do have to register with the city or town, and those registration fees are then being funneled into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So that's also an option here. In other communities that have a little bit more of a what is the word I'm looking for? They have a little bit more travel base, where people, come to visit a little bit more frequently, places like Boston or the Cape, where they have a lot of hotels and they're using portions of the rooms tax for funding towards the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as well. So there's a lot of options out there. We definitely kind of need to explore some more in order to figure out what are the best ways and some of the largest chunks of money that can be committed here to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for the town of Reading. And just some more strategies here for the affordable housing funding and resources. Building support for Community Preservation Act. So this did come up in the first meeting. It's coming up again, and it's something that should be explored to strengthen the local finances, and specifically for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We want to maintain the Housing Choice Initiative status, so that it puts the town in position to apply for other future grants and other funding opportunities, considering the commercial linkage fee to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and other affordable housing needs, developing a strategy to develop additional affordable units off-site, and then considering tax incentives to develop deeply affordable homes and plan for cases of emergency housing needs. So we did have a pretty detailed discussion related to emergency housing needs and in the need out there for those types of services in the event that somebody experiences a fire or a displacement, or their unit or home is unlivable due to, it could be a utility issue, it could be a plumbing issue, or other things where someone is in need of temporary emergency housing. So that was definitely a pretty detailed discussion there. And then the next focus here is on the leadership, partnership, and education. So the first goal here underneath this category is talking about strengthening local and regional relationships among housing providers and the planning departments, working in cooperation and collaboration together with those partners and organizations, and promoting an enhanced understanding of housing needs and support for the creation of affordable housing. So getting the word out in the community, letting people know that this is definitely a need and that these types of units and this type of housing does assist people in, stability, as well as, a livable, affordable place. The second goal here is to increase the capacity to produce housing, and talking about advocacy, staffing, funding, establishing goals and diverse relationships, providing education and support to the local staff, boards and commissions, and the general public about affordable housing. And then goal 3, ensuring access, support, outreach, and inclusion to the social and vulnerable populations across the town. So again, getting the word out, getting out to the people who wouldn't normally come to these types of meetings or would not normally participate in these discussions. So we want to hear from everybody, and outreach is pretty much the only way to do it. So the strategies here as to how we intend on tackling some of these goals is to foster partnerships and initiatives with the landlords in town, already existing landlords, to upgrade their apartments or their apartment complexes and possibly convert some of those units to affordable housing units. So again, this is a program that could possibly be created. And as we know, and I don't know if you have this same experience in Reading, but I've found, and I know this to be true here in Rhode Island, is a lot of the time some landlords get tired of renting to people, or their building is not up to code. They need to do some, upgrades or modifications, and they can't afford it, and they just let the units sit vacant. So this is kind of the type of outreach that could be done to maybe some of those homeowners who have vacant units and are in those types of positions where the property needs a little bit of upgrading. Maybe they need a new heating system, some of the electrical isn't up to code, those kind of things. And maybe make it sort of, a deal where they get some help in fixing things up, but they also have to rent the unit out as an affordable unit. I mean, that's a program that could definitely be explored. Number 2 is seeking proposals from private developers or property owners to upgrade the developments or their units in turn for long-term affordability restrictions. So again, designating some of those units in larger developments to include some additional affordable housing units. And then number 3, which is maintain and continuing to build on that interested buyers list. So there is a list that is maintained with the town of Reading that tracks all interested buyers of affordable housing units. Additional strategies, continuing public engagement and education on housing needs. So again, not everybody's housing need is the same. Continuing to support the work of the Metro North Regional Housing Services Office and collaborate with the community organizations to get the word out and hopefully possibly be able to develop some additional programming, and affordable housing units. And just to kind of get into a little bit more detail of what the Metro North Regional Housing Services Office is, they are hosted by the town of Reading. So the town of Reading is the lead for the Metro North Regional Housing Services Office. It includes a total of 5 communities, which is Reading, North Reading, Wilmington, Woburn, and Saugus. So they've pooled their resources together to kind of create this regional housing office to assist people who live in the area with housing issues, questions, problems, referrals, and such. So again, yes, provides affordable housing support and information, monitoring the more than 2,500 units in the 5-member towns, and its mission to expand low and moderate income housing options. It ensures that the owners of affordable properties are in compliance with their restrictions, and also assisting owners of affordable units in the resale process in the case that they decide that they are going to sell their unit. And the Metro North Regional Housing Service Office also keeps track of that interested buyers list for not only the town of Reading, but also the other 4 communities that are part of the Metro North Regional Housing Services Office. Their website is down in the left-hand corner here. If anybody decides they want to check it out, give it a whirl. It does list options for rental as well as homeownership on there for affordable units. So these are all affordable rental and ownership units that are available out there in the 5-member communities. And then getting into the enhanced public understanding of housing needs and creation of affordable housing opportunities. This is always a challenge, no matter what community you're in. We would like to expand community outreach and education efforts around affordable housing, initiate a public awareness campaign to build and maintain support for local affordable housing initiatives, articulate the unmet local housing needs, and creating some infographics and brochures, posters, and some online content there to kind of get people thinking about the affordability and how that, you know, plays into how it affects people's lives. And we are also exploring applying for CHAPA. For those of you who are not aware of who and what CHAPA is, they are the Citizens Housing and Planning Association in the state of Massachusetts, but they are actually regional for New England. So from Connecticut up to Maine, all of those states do belong to CHAPA's organization. And what they do is they're an affordable housing advocacy nonprofit, and they have this program called Municipal Engagement Initiative, the Light Community Program. And what it does is it assists the community, town, city, whoever, with the community outreach and the education piece to support affordable housing production across the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth. So we have explored this program and are kind of mulling over the application process and possibly becoming a community who participates in this engagement to further the outreach on affordable housing production and education. Questions? Oh,
I see Karen has her hand raised.
yeah, I said I see a hand. I don't know how to look at it though.
Okay. Thank you very much. No, this was very helpful. I was taking some notes at the end. Had a quick question. When you were talking about sources of revenue to support your affordable housing trust, why do cell towers come up specifically out of all the sorts of revenues that a community may have?
that is a good question. I do believe, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, that the town is currently leasing land to cell companies for their cell towers. Is that correct?
It's in process. We will be very shortly. By next
Okay,
summer, we will be, but why? So maybe I'm misunderstanding. Was this just something that we generated internally as a source of potential revenue? Or was
yes.
this like a, oh, okay. I was thinking this was like a statewide thing. Ooh, cell
Mm.
towers should definitely fund affordable housing.
No, that's not a statewide thing. It's just an additional source of revenue that could be looked at to kind of put some funds towards affordable housing. Like I said, I've seen things such as in a lot of other communities, they're using marijuana tax revenue funds to put into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So I think it's really more of wherever they can grab some extra cash to put it into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, they are. So I think it really depends on the type of, funding and taxes and in revenue that each community has across the state.
Okay, well, I guess, so we don't have any hotels here.
No.
But we do have a meals tax as well.
Mhm.
So, okay, food for thought, and I'm so glad you mentioned the CPA, because I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, that is how a lot of communities are getting a really good head start on their own affordable housing.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Andrew, do we have anyone else?
We don't, at least not yet, but we had a lot of information out there, so I'll ask the group at large. We had a lot of overarching goals and strategies to get there, and new things, creative things that we haven't heard before, such as leasing of land and so on. So I'd like to ask if everybody agrees with some of the strategies that they've heard, or if there's anything that they think we're missing. Again, we're going to have additional public input opportunities, but I'll ask the group at large right now if there's any last comments. I'm not seeing any hands, Nicole.
Okay. Do we want to go to the discussion points?
Yeah, I had a few questions, and I can pull up my Jamboards if you'd like, so
I have to stop sharing. Okay.
no worries. So we got our working group here, and I created some Jamboards, which is a fun, interesting tool to try to use for these. So we've heard our goals and strategies, and we'll continue to ask. Oops, sorry, I'm on the wrong Jamboard. Let me pull up the right one. So we'll continue to ask through the process if we're hitting the right strategies, if we're missing anything on these key topics that Nicole mentioned in the presentation. We have some additional questions I will continue to put out there. What areas in the town do you feel are most appropriate for denser housing development, and why? Don't know if anybody on the call has any thoughts on that. We've heard downtown and train station for sure, loud and clear, but is there any new thoughts on that? Check. Oakland Road, yes, that's another opportunity that is being explored. Thank you.
And I think, heard about industrial and commercial areas.
We did.
Yeah, I think that downtown and near the train station are great things to have on that list, but as we like learned on the CPDC, you know, with some of the feedback last year, even there's been pushback and a desire for lower density. So I think it's good. Well, we definitely should keep that on the list. It's good to have like multiple things. So it's not like everything has to go to one location.
Agreed. Getting pressure off of the downtown is certainly something we need to explore. And that does kind of lead into the next question of density, because as we continue with MBTA communities and have heard some feedback from the town throughout our 40R developments, we're going to look to engage on what type of density that the residents and public feels best fits Reading's existing character, and what is most needed or helpful to the regional need. So thinking on townhome style developments, triplex, maybe smaller multifamily unit developments, and even where larger multifamily developments is going to be a key initiative going forward, just because MBTA communities does require a minimum density of 15 units per acre across whatever is zoned that we look at. So I don't know if anybody here has thoughts on density. I know that's a loaded question and a large topic to tackle.
I think it's important to point out the tools that go along with density, like the work that the CPDC has done on design guidelines and step backs and open space and ways to design for density, I guess is what I'm thinking of.
Makes a lot of sense. Oh, see Karen has her hand raised again.
Thank you. I was just gonna say it's really hard to answer number 2 because I think those guidelines, the design guidelines are a key part of it. Because people don't want, you know, in so much as the state doesn't force us, we don't want giant brick buildings and no green space and no trees and no scale. So, you know, as long as you can always have design guidelines around it, then I think that I heard you say 15 is the minimum for the MBTA community. So 15 per acre.
Yeah, but and that again is across the whole geography of whatever is zoned. It might not need to be site specific.
Okay, because so that's a really good point, depending on, you know, what it's next to. If it's the industrial commercial area, which is already paved and already devoid of trees and landscaping, then it might be more palatable to have higher density communities there versus some of the other areas in town where they're currently forested.
Great. And I know that's like you said, a lot to answer to try to answer in one quick response. So we'll continue on that conversation, both with CPDC, town meeting, select board, and the public at large. So let me also jump to, we had our goals and strategies on funding and resources. We've had a lot of existing resources and things that we can look to promote, but I'd like to ask the group, what resources do you feel are most important to provide for affordable housing development, affordable housing ownerships, and residents that already exist in town? And subsequently, if we can be better prepared for emergency housing situations. Over the last year or so, we saw what happened on Washington Street, and the town did a great quick job finding a solution for that. But if we can be better prepared through programming and resources, we'd certainly love to know. Karen, go right ahead again.
Okay, thank you. I was really glad to see first-time homeowner programs highlighted in this presentation. I've seen it in other communities and I've never understood why we're so different. So kudos for putting that in there. Maybe another thought in that category would be funding to help folks if they are able to buy one of our affordable units that's available for sale to supplement the rate structure, to use some funds to buy down the rate for them so that it is in fact affordable.
Good idea.
Yeah, one of the things that I've used in some of my other roles in other communities is what's called a deferred payment loan. And so with these outside resources, leveraging and underwriting the cost through what is essentially a second mortgage, but it's forgiven if the homeowner lives there in the affordable unit for a number of years. So the deferred payment loans are essentially a grant to help underwrite that cost. That's one tool I've seen used.
I've seen them be grants as well. They have been smaller amounts that what may be needed now, but yeah, if 5 years or so, they're completely forgiven. And then it also involves the educational component where the applicant, goes through the standard first-time ownership. What does that mean? Process.
Makes a lot of sense. That sounds great.
And Habitat for Humanity, I know we have that in a couple of places, but a little bit of partnering with those kinds of resources and having the homeowner with sweat equity. And I think that's a really nice model.
Yes, and that actually does bring us right into our next topic of partners, which I can share. So just added, that's a good one that I didn't have on there already, Habitat for Humanity. So there's a number of partners locally, regionally, and even beyond. So this is the list we have so far. Is there anyone that we're missing so far in?
So Sudeshna and I spent a little time today thinking about some other things to add to the list. The lenders and the local financial institutions, we've already done a lot with them. That's how we were able to help with the displaced residents of the Main Street property that had the flood. They were a huge partner in getting resources to people who were in need. And along with the Salvation Army, I can't remember if that's on this list. Yeah, the Salvation Army was another huge resource to help those people, as well as Metro Boston Housing. Yeah, we have Metro Boston. Yep. Those were the three key groups that we worked with to solve that horrific housing crisis that those people were displaced. Do we have the Housing Authority on this list?
We do.
Okay, good.
And I'm actually going to add the library as well as we learn about some more of their programming and resources for residents that they're able to provide and use, which is a great tool.
Should we include local churches? Like, I don't remember the one, but I know the food pantry has actually bumped into people in housing crisis and to do some resources sourcing on a smaller scale. So we might want to include that.
Sure. We do have community nonprofits and faith orgs over here, but the food pantry is another great example. And then my last question for the night is how we can improve on outreach for initiatives and programming and workshopping. So we have our best practices, and that can include mailings, flyers, social media, but if there's any other creative opportunities to, and I know timeliness is important as well, but if there's other creative opportunities to get the word out there and help people learn about these events, learn about these opportunities, we'd certainly love to learn more. Go ahead, Jean.
No, I was gonna say, tying the work that we're doing to other events, workshops, community-based activities is what comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
We had a big outpouring on Veterans Day.
I was
I
gonna
don't know
say,
if that's a good example, but
do you have any like community health fairs or anything like that? That would be like a great place for this because it kind of like nests right into those, community health issues.
Makes a lot of
yeah, and
sense.
the Reading Municipal Light Department does a great open house. They do a really, it's very popular. A lot of families get there. So teaming up with RMLD, we've done a couple things with them. I think we could get a lot of traction, and the Lions Club has their town day, Fall Street Fair.
That's all great stuff. Well, I think that's all the questions we had. And again, we'll continue to keep asking these questions because it's very important for us to learn and provide. So if there's any last comments, we're happy to hear them. All right. Well, going forward, as I mentioned, it's been a great conversation and we're going to keep them going. Our next steps are to finalize up some of the draft language on the housing production plan itself. We're going to then take that plan, post it on the website as well as with some of the info shared tonight. And we'll take it to both the Community Planning and Development Commission in January and the Select Board as well, all before February 2023. So between now and then, there should be 2 to 4 opportunities through those boards to learn more, provide more input, and keep up to date. So we have our project website, readingma.gov/HPP. And as always, you can reach out to staff for anything at all, and we're happy to help. And with that, I think we can say good night.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Andrew.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.